Today we're going to talk about a product that you may be familiar with. We've had this for a little while, but this is our adjustable alignment bracket for posterior mounted feet. What's new is that we have our new wedge kits. So what the wedges are going to allow is additional adjustment that we didn't have in the past. So these wedges are going to allow plantar flexion, dorsiflexion of the foot, as well as internal and external rotation. Now, if you're not familiar with this product, it slides right over the foot. And what it's going to allow us to do is to change the height. We're going to get AB and AD adduction, about 8 degrees total. We're also going to get about a ½ inch of slide in an AML. So this gives you a whole lot of adjustability and makes fitting a posterior mount foot very similar to fitting a distal mount foot, so it can make it pretty simple. So what we're going to show you today is how to set this foot up, how to transfer that alignment back out so that you can make these fittings go as quick as possible. So if I am setting up a foot, I've got two options. Now, I've got a lot of different feet, so I've got both pediatric and adult feet, so I need both options available. There is a pediatric adjustable alignment bracket, and that'll go with the Fillauer pediatric formula. And there is also an adult alignment bracket, and that's going to fit the adult formula as well as the posterior mount All Pro and the different posterior mounted blades. So each of these will let you fit a variety of feet. I also have those 2-hole brackets. These can be one of the 2 permanent solutions with either of those feet, but I will need those so I can show you those later as well for the setup. So we're going to pop these together. What I'm going to assemble first is going to be an adult foot. So I'm going to go ahead and slide the pediatric stuff out of the way for now for us here. And so now we have the adult materials. So with the alignment bracket, it's going to come with a set of 4 bolts in it. So those 4 bolts that it comes with, those are for using the bracket without any wedges. So when you put that on the foot, this is going to fit any of the feet without any wedges installed, and it's going to allow you to tighten that down. Now, if I want to use wedges, my wedge kit is going to come with 3 different lengths of bolt with it. So for that, I will need to go ahead and remove those bolts that do come with the bracket. And what I'm going to want to select, if I'm going to use the wedges, is I've got all 4 of these wedges right here, and I'm going to need a bolt that's long enough to close this entire assembly on the foot and clamp it down. So I'm going to want to find one of these bolts that's going to give me the best total engagement, which looks like for this particular foot, which is a G category, so one of the heavier feet, I'm going to be using the longest bolts in the kit. So I'm just going to go ahead and move these out of the way and know that I'm going to need to set this up with that alignment, or that set of bolts. So I've got these bolts, and I want to go ahead and put my bracket on. I'm going to want to use my wedges. So what I want to do when I set this up to start with is take those bolts that I was going to use with wedges installed. Now I'm going to go ahead and set this foot up with those bolts in place. So now, these are 5mm Allen, so we'll go ahead and just tighten those down right about there. Let's just kind of center this foot up in the bracket. Lightly snug those up. This is going to be a 3mm Allen wrench on the outside, and we'll use these to kind of center the foot up, because we want to start with all available adjustment we can get. We're just going to snug these up. Center this foot up on the bracket. There we go. So I'm going to center that foot up on the bracket. Go ahead and tighten this down. You're going to want to tighten alternating like you're fixing a tire on a wheel. Until you get them just slightly tightened down. There is a mark here, 10 Newton meters. If you want to torque them, that'll be what you'll torque them up to. For the purpose of putting on the socket, I don't necessarily need to do that yet. So I do have that going ahead and marked. On the back side, I now have some bolts sticking through. They're sticking through pretty far here, so I know that I probably can go ahead and swap these over to the slightly shorter bolts if I would like to. Or I can just leave these in. For now, I'll leave these in because I have a smaller socket and it's not going to matter. But it's important that whatever bolt you're going to be using when you put the wedges in, you use as you're doing the initial setup, because what we need to do is when we put this on the back of our socket, we need the space provided on the back for those bolts to come in and not bottom out on the socket itself. So when we go back and fill this with our epoxy, I don't want these bolts to hit epoxy right here. I need them to have a space to come through. So that's what these are going to be pushed through for. So it's really important to do this if you're going to want to use the wedges later, because we're going to have to add them in. So once I've got my brackets set up and I've got either patient's prosthesis, there are other prosthesis to set this up with, and that's a great start, is to start, even if it's taking a check socket and putting that on, especially a distal mount all pro is a great way to kind of do a comparison between these. Go ahead and set that up, and then what you're going to want to do is transfer that alignment over to this device. If I was starting with a check socket and having to align this from scratch, what I'd probably do is go ahead and bisect that socket in the frontal and sagittal planes. And those are going to give me kind of where I want to start out for a setup. I'm also going to go ahead and mark the center of my posterior trim line and any inset that I may or may not have with that foot. One way to get some of that is to take the foot and you're going to actually turn it around so that you can see the back of it. And when I set these up, I do prefer to use the posterior trim line as my height mark, especially if I'm going from one socket to another. I can even take and mark the patient's current liner and then put a second mark on the liner to see a height difference, maybe even between different sockets in that posterior. But it gives me a good reference mark to start putting the height of my leg. So what I'm going to do to get my different measurements, so I'm going to put a ruler right up the back of the socket, and I'm going to use that to measure both height, but then also I'm going to mark where the center of the heel is falling on that socket, and that's what's going to give me that inset mark. So I'm going to get a pretty good idea of where this socket is sitting in space, because I'm going to be getting both. So with my alignment lines, I'm going to be getting both the ABA deduction, the flexion extension, and then with that mark that I put on the back, I'm going to be able to get my medial lateral offset and the height. So with this foot, I'm kind of already there. So we're going to imagine I'm going to take this one out, and I'm going to want to set that up on this socket. So when I go to set it up on the socket, what I'm going to want to do is take all the measurements I got off of here, and I'm going to transfer those right back over to this socket. And that's going to help me to set my socket in the correct rotation, also at the correct height. Do make sure when you're setting these sockets up that if your patient is using a liner, or excuse me, a sealing sleeve, that with the sealing sleeve you're giving yourself at least an inch of socket over the top of this bracket so that you can make sure to get that sealing sleeve sealed off here, because you're going to be bonding this plate on with the FabTech epoxy or Plus Series composite adhesive. This one works quite well. It's going to be the best way to set these up. A lot of times, if I'm really unsure of my alignment, or I'm starting from scratch with a patient, so I don't know exactly where we're going to end up, before I do anything, I may take the 25-second version and just put a little dot here in the center, put my socket on, and make sure I'm at least in the ballpark. If I know where I'm going to be with most of these measurements, I'll go ahead and put a pretty big glob in the middle, get that socket set up, and then fiberglassed on. So we're going to go ahead and take our Plus Series adhesive. We're going to just put it right on the back of that plate. So here we go. We're going to get this all over the back of this plate. really fill in pretty good. I don't want this thing to come off. So now we're going to take our socket, go ahead and start getting it in place here. And you're going to want at this point to go ahead and match up all those angles you took. So we'll take a look at this. We want to make sure that we get our internal external rotation pretty close. We'll come back and we'll double check our posterior trim line height. We measured right at about 16 on that other socket. Now in this plane, what I'm looking for is I want the sagittal bisection of this socket to really match up nicely with the pylon angle of the foot. It's going to be both for the All-Pro and the Formula. That's a great starting point. If your patient's socket had measured a lot of extension already, I might add additional extension to the socket at this point. But what I'm looking for right now is to make sure in each plane that it's matching up to what I expect it to. Especially in this frontal plane, making sure in the transverse plane, making sure the external rotation of that foot is about 5 to 7 degrees. Now that this is set up, the first thing I would do if I'm putting this on a patient, but for the sake of being able to see it, we won't do this on this one, is I am going to go ahead and wrap this thing up with fiberglass cast tape so that it won't fall off on them. I'm going to use 2-inch tech form. I find that this works really, really well and is safe for pretty much any patient I've used it on. The nice thing about the 2-inch is that 2-inch, when you pull on it, actually fits really nicely in the grooves that we put on the back of our devices. It actually fits perfectly kind of right in this space. So it's going to hold it on really nicely and make it secure. So once I have that on, I'm working with the patient, I decide I want to make an adjustment. So what do I need to do? Well, I'm going to loosen the 4 screws on the back here, the 4 large ones. I'm going to loosen all of those up, right like this. Now I've got some ability to adjust. So I'm going to be able to do about 4 degrees in each direction of AAB adduction, so 8 degrees total. So now if we're going to loosen these side bolts, the foot's going to move again, so I can make some adjustments here. I'll tell you that normally you're going to end up about 3/8, quarter to 3/8 of an inch longer on this side than you would normally, because as they come over the foot, it is going to shorten on them slightly. So very frequently I'll end up slightly lengthening this compared to what I would see on their other socket. So now we've got that set up so we can do those adjustments. If I wanted to loosen these and tighten these set screws on this side, I can actually shift that foot back and forth in the ML. So that gives me all my adjustments in those planes. Now what it doesn't do is it doesn't give me plantar flexion, dorsiflexion, or inversion, eversion. That's where the wedges are going to come in. So if I find that I need to make those adjustments, this is a little more complex. So we'll go ahead now and let's set up this foot with a set of wedges in it. So we'll remove the bracket. Now the first thing I want to do, because I know that I like where I have the foot in every other plane, is I want to mark it up. So you can either use a white China marker, which can be a little scary just because you might accidentally wipe it off, or you can use a silver Sharpie. So this gives us kind of a good start. I can see where this foot was in space. I know kind of all my angles on that, so when I come back I can make sure that I'm right where I want it to be. Because the first thing I'm going to do is remove this. Do note which set of set screws you're removing, otherwise you'll have to try to remember which ones you tightened and which ones you didn't. So now my foot will come free, and I can go ahead and install the wedges. Wedges can be installed up to 1 pair of wedges on the front of the foot. So these can be done in any orientation you would like. So you can do 1 in plantar flexion, dorsiflexion, and 1 in internal external rotation, or both in either of those directions. Each wedge is approximately 1.5 degrees for a total of 3 degrees in any direction maximum. Now, if you've had a bracket since the beginning, we've had these holes in it. That was going to be for these. We just needed to figure out a way to make these cost effectively for you. So we've got that now. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take these wedges in, and with that plus side up, that's going to give me increased dorsiflexion of the foot. If you're working with the wedges and you want them to stick together a little bit, you can take a tiny drop of super glue and just put a little bit right on one of those little dots in the back. I'm going to go ahead and shake most of that off onto my table here. It needs a little extra finish anyway. There we go. And then I'll spray the opposite side with a Fast Fix. And stick my wedges together. This will just tack them down a little bit for me so that when I go to do this, I don't have to worry about them moving around on me. So I'll put those in there. Now, I ought to bring my foot over here. And what I'm going to need, since the plus is up here, I'm going to take my other 2 wedges with the plus side down. Those are going to go on the back side of my foot. Now, I'll take my bracket, put it in place. You can feel when those little tabs pop in place on your wedges. There we go. And we'll put that bracket right back to where it was because we had marked it with the Sharpie. Now, I'll reset my pylon to right where it was when I took it off. Right there. That's back in the center. There we go. And alternately retighten these bolts on the back. This is why we left that additional space. Now I have enough bolt to go ahead and tighten these back down. Now that I've gotten them on just a little bit, I can go ahead and take and just make sure that my bracket is back in perfect alignment. Tighten these the rest of the way down. Make sure my AB and AD adduction is set correctly. Oop, a little tight. Back that off just a little so we can get some rotation. Reset that slightly. Tighten in our side screws. Right there. And we'll tighten this all the way down. Now, as you get to where you can feel that they are snug, we do recommend that if you're working with a patient that we're going to take the torque wrench and we are going to go ahead and tighten these up to the full 10 Newton meters. Now on the pediatric bracket, it is important to note the brackets that you have currently say 10 Newton meters for this. If you use the wedges, you will only tighten them to 5 Newton meters. It's in the instructions and it'll be on any new brackets, but the older brackets will still say 10. Do note that on the pediatric, you'll only tighten them down to 5 Newton meters. If you don't, you'll see that the bracket will start to bend slightly. That'll be a great notification you're over tightening it. So go ahead and tighten it up to the appropriate torque. And this is gonna hold up really well. Your patient's not gonna just slip with this thing. So now, what I've done is I've actually created additional dorsiflexion, I've created additional dorsiflexion in the foot. So the toes come up very slightly. So I've made that adjustment. The patient will be able to walk more easily up over that toe. So I've made that quick adjustment for this foot. Now I can do the same thing just by orienting those wedges in a slightly different direction, depending on what kind of adjustment I want to make. The most important thing is, and I'll show this again with the pediatric wedges, is that if I have any 2 wedges installed or any wedge installed on one side of the foot, I have to install the second set of wedges and the exact or opposite orientation on the other side of the foot. This is really, really important so that you can make sure that the patients, that the bolts are going to be really nice and straight on the back, and you're going to stay, that the foot's going to stay clamped on appropriately. So in order to transfer this foot, since we have some wedges in here, there's going to be a couple extra things that we need to do from the case where we have no wedges at all. So because these wedges are in here, I want you to go ahead and note a few things. So first of all, you've got 2 holes here. So these 2 holes on the back that are threaded, these are for connecting to our transfer fixture, either side here. And there's another pair of holes, and these you should notice at this point as well. These are going to be your pilot holes for drilling the foot for the 2-hole bracket. So this is what's going to set you up with the perfect spacing for these holes. So that's what those holes are on the back. And just remember that you're going to be using these 2 holes to set this up. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take this foot and I'm going to bolt it to the fixture here. So my bolts are going to go through these side pieces and right into the back of the adjustable alignment bracket. So now we're all set here, and we're ready to start the transfer process. So what I need to remember now, and this is the most important thing, is to remember how those wedges are set on the inside. And I'm not worried about these wedges that are here between the foot and the socket. I'm concerned with the wedges that are on the back side of that pylon there. So on the back side of that foot, those wedges, if we remember, were aligned with the plus side down. So I've gone ahead and I've marked that on my socket because I'm going to need to know that later just in case anything falls out. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to pour this socket right here in alignment so that we know exactly where that foot was in space compared to this socket. So because this one is going to be a direct lamination, when I pour this up, instead of going ahead and pouring it all the way up, I can go ahead and just fill this with plaster like this. This is going to make my life a whole lot easier when it comes time to chip this back out, because my posterior mount lamination method does not require a full socket lamination, so it makes our life a whole lot easier. So we'll just use this to go ahead and transfer over our alignment. Okay. Now that I've got that in there, I'm just going to go ahead and tighten that up. And, ooh, we'll hope that our tape doesn't rip multiple times. And I think we are golden. Hey, there we go. All right. So now we'll let this plaster set up. That's going to go ahead and give us our alignment captured. So we're going to be ready to transfer this foot over to any type of alignment you really want to. In this specific setting, we'll show you kind of a little more what you'd do if it was a direct lamination. So plaster set up. So we're going to remove the 4 socket head screws on the back that connect this back plate to the socket plate, the clamp to the plate rather. There we go. All right. So now we'll go ahead and move this socket out of the way. So now we know where our wedges were. Now, we have a few options here. We can go ahead and transfer it straight over to our socket. We can do a direct lamination. You can go ahead and skin this up. You do want to be careful at this point. So what can happen, right now this foot is held okay, but it's not super tight. This is why you want to remember exactly where your foot is and the alignment of those wedges, because if you happen to find that your foot starts to slip, you're going to want to be able to replace those wedges. So what we're going to do, we're going to grab those wedges that fell out. We're going to put them to the side. And I'm going to pretend that this foot broke loose, because you may run into that situation where it does, especially with the pediatric foot, or if you've done an internal or external rotation of the foot, because you'll need those wedges to put them back. So we're going to pretend that this foot fell out or came loose. So there it is, it's loose. I do remember I loosened these screws up. So thankfully I have another set of wedges, so my other ones fell on the floor. But what I know is that these wedges, because I wrote it on the side of my socket, are in there with the plus side down. If my foot comes loose, all I have to do is come over to these two back screws on my plate. So I know that those the plus side was down. So I'm going to take this and insert this in here with the plus side down until two of those little projections on the back are above the bar and the cross. And I can come back in. Tighten it a little too tight. There we go. Nice and centered. And I can bring this back in. And now I've taken and I've transferred that alignment to the back. I marked my foot, so I know exactly where that foot went. So I'm going to take my foot, I can bring it right back over, set it right back in place. I know that I loosened these set screws. Whoop. Double check my height, there we go. Go ahead and retighten both of those set screws. I know now that this foot is right back in the exact same alignment that it was before. The wedges now being on the back have kicked that foot out to the correct alignment. I can take the plate off the back of this socket. I can bring that socket back in, glue this right on there, and my alignment will be transferred. Now what we need to look at is if I need to now transfer this with two holes in it, because that's going to look a little different, and that's where we need to actually do a little more thinking. So let's pause here for a minute, and we're going to switch this out with a pediatric foot that already has a slot so that we can show you what the difference is going to look like. Okay, so this is the scenario that could be a little more challenging. This is a pediatric posterior mount formula. It has a slot cut in it. This would be the custom version of that formula. So in this case, I'm going to have to transfer and put this two-hole bracket in place. Now on this one, this is going to be the worst case scenario one, because I'm pretty sure this foot's going to come out when I let it loose. Now I've gone ahead and I have marked up my foot, made sure I know exactly where in space this foot is sitting so I can't miss and put it in the wrong place. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to loosen these two bolts on the side so I know where that's going to sit, but let's go ahead and pull this foot out. So we're going to go ahead and loosen those 4 bolts on the sides, and we're going to find that that foot is probably not going to stay in place. Already looking a little loose. Now if you only have one wedge in here, most likely that foot's going to stay. Once you get to 2 wedges, it starts to get a little more challenging. So you just want to go ahead and plan for the scenario in which the foot comes out, which it's going to do here. Get it to loosen for me here. There we go. Well, maybe not too bad. It's going to stay for just a second, but I wouldn't trust this to hold on while I'm doing that alignment transfer. So same scenario, I have my pluses at the bottom, just like I did before. Now, if I've only got one wedge in here, I'm probably going to be all right. Two, I can see this foot's barely hanging on. If I've got the one wedge in here, I can go ahead and just take this, and I use a little double stick tape, and I'm just going to go ahead and glue that pyramid, or the pyramid. I'm going to go ahead and glue this 2-hole bracket right here at the bottom of the slot. That's going to want to be where you want to transfer that alignment, so that as the kid grows, you can have some room to slide that down. But let's say that the foot came loose, so we'll go ahead and loosen it up. We'll pull these 2 bolts on the side. Out come the wedges. So we know that our pluses were at the bottom. We're going to go ahead and loosen this up just a little on the bracket. Slide our wedges in like we just talked about with the adult. A little looser. Right on up. There we go. All right, everything's back in place. Bring my foot back. Put it right on those marks on the height. I know that it's going to be in the right position. I can even loosen these a little more, make it easier. As long as I only loosen set screws on one side, bring that back into my marks, tighten it back down. Foot is again in the exact same alignment. Bring in my 2-hole bracket. I'll go ahead and tape it this time. I'm just going to go ahead and take a little double stick tape, put it on the side. There we go. And now I am ready to transfer this foot over to a socket. So if this was my pediatric socket, I'm just going to bring this right back in, put it in place, add my adhesive, put my socket right in on top. So now I've shown you how we can transfer to a direct mount where I've got access to the foot, or we transfer over to a 2-hole bracket. If at this point I still have a solid pylon, the other thing I may want to do is, let's say that I want to drill for a 2-hole bracket. Instead of directly going to put this on, if this was a solid pylon, I can go ahead and take this back out, knowing where my wedges went, drill my 2 holes using my pilot holes, put all this back in with my wedges, and I can transfer the 2-hole bracket by putting that 2-hole bracket straight in my newly drilled holes. Just as easy. Hopefully, that gives you a good idea of how to use our new wedge kit. Definitely makes this a little bit simpler, because now I can have movement in all 3 planes and get my alignment just right before I do my transfer.